Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Dean and CJ. It's nice to see you both.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, sure.
Wish we were all together in person, and then we could all go for a glass of something.
We wish. Yeah, we wish. We will do it soon. Yep.
My kind of team.
Let me find your bio.
Come on.
Kelly, I'm looking for the CJ's bio. Oh, yes, I have it here. Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Patel College of Global Sustainability Speaker Series. I'm Govind Paril, Dean of the Patel College. This afternoon, I am delighted to welcome CJ Reynolds. She's going to be our speaker today. CJ Reynolds is the Director of Resilience. Please mute your microphone. Thank you. CJ is the Director of Resilience and Engagement at the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, TBRPC for the short form, and is the staff lead for the new Regional Resilience Coalition, which includes 29 local governments. CJ has over 30 years of experience working with the scientists, business executives, professional associations, and state and federal agencies to address emerging risks through innovative education and public-private partnerships. She's an expert in municipal climate resilience and sustainability practices and food safety. From 2011 to 2018, CJ was a research associate at the University of South Florida College of Marine Science, where she developed and coordinated stakeholder engagement research. PCGS and TBRPC, Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, have partnered together this semester on a National Renewable Energy Lab funded project called Clear Sky Project. Some of our students who are in the economics and finance class might know about this project. So I'm sure CJ will be saying more about that. Without further ado, let me welcome CJ Reynolds. Speak for about 35 minutes or so, or maybe not more than 40. Then we have plenty of time for Q&A.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dean, and thank you, Kelly, for setting me up and bringing me into this class. I'm very excited. So first, I have two questions I want to have you guys post into the chat box. One, who is in the energy finance class? So I can see, because you might have heard this. So if you can say, just put your name in and say, yes, I'm in that class this semester. If you're not in it, don't post in it. And so I'll just get a sense of how many folks are in that. And then also what I'm interested in is finding out how many of you are actually interested in pursuing a career in local governments or government agencies after you graduate. Or if you're interested in a consulting position. So just go ahead and pop into the chat that says consulting or government, and that'll be an interesting thing. And maybe Kelly or Deepak can help me keep track of that, because I'm like sort of handicapped when it comes to monitoring the chat. Okay, I want to see the chat conversation.
I'll be happy to monitor for you, CJ.
Okay, great, thanks. So yeah, okay. So who's interested in governments? And if you're already there, some super. Great. Well, I'm excited that you're all learning about sustainability, and we can talk about policy. And then the last part is I don't know what the overlap is, so I don't want to bore you too much about it if you've already seen it in Pradeep Haldar's class, which we're very excited to be a part of that. I'm going to show my presentation. I am going to also give you a link, a very short link to a Google Jamboard. I just learned this like about 2 hours ago in a in a workshop, so I thought I would inflict it on you as well, and maybe some of your other classes involve that. So wow, this is great. This is really helpful background for me to see what your interests are. So now let me get set up with sharing my content here. First, I'm going to put a link into the chat box. You guys should save that. Don't be getting ahead of things here. So I'm going to go just post that. Let's see. Why is this? Okay, it's big type. Anyway, it's a short link. It's taking us to a Google form. Don't go there yet. You'll ruin my surprise and my fun. So now I'm going to share my presentation. And let's see, where is this thing? Let's see. Are you seeing a screen with a bunch of flooded buildings on it?
Yep.
Oh,
Yes.
perfect. Excellent. So thank you again. So I'm going to show you some fun maps. Then you might have to go and take a nap afterwards to reboot your brain. So this is some of the work that we do. Collaborating with our counties and working with cities is to really look at the impacts of climate on a variety of hazards. So this is what you're seeing. There's some flood risk maps for the region. This was modeled up to 2045, and we're looking at Category 3 events and NOAA high, which is sea level rise curve, on one of the curves that's been, or scenarios that's been defined for the region. So you can see what a Category 3 storm will do to downtown Tampa. Actually, this fabulous picture up in the top was produced over at the School of Architecture, Florida Center for Community Design. We have a good collaboration over in that program too. So today what I'm going to do is just give you a few brief words about the Regional Planning Council and give you some context of our efforts. Talk a little bit about the Regional Resilience Coalition, and then I'm more excited to talk about two initiatives we have which intersect also with sustainability, resiliency, and equity. And then lastly, just a kind of an overview of the Regional Action Plan, which we are now kicking off in the last couple of weeks or so. So as I said, I really want to get some input and collaboration from you. I'm going to attempt to have you guys go into this Google Jamboard when I get to a certain point in the conversation. So then I'll invite you to go and share some thoughts and ideas. And I thought that might be a way. And it's great for me to be able to capture your thoughts and ideas instead of trying to, remember it and rely on faulty memory here. So with no more. So the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council spans 6 counties, all the way up to Citrus County and down to Manatee County. You're probably most familiar with the ones around it. They sit on our board. We also have 21 local governments or cities, as well as gubernatorial appointees from different agencies and divisions. So Florida Department of Transportation, Southwest Water Management, and that sort of thing. So our council meets about 10 times a year. And since March, we've been meeting virtually, like many other organizations. So in 2018, at that time, Commissioner Janet Long, who's a Pinellas County Commissioner, was the chair of the Regional Planning Council. And she was the one who was really motivated to catalyze the formation of the Resilience Coalition. And at that time, we had like 26 local governments who signed a memorandum of understanding, which is a 4-page document that spells out what we will agree to collaborate on. So in that document defines the risks, the need for science, the need to engage the business community, et cetera. So it's a really good document, but it takes quite a lot to get local governments to adopt these things and commit to it. So each one of these local governments went through their own process of putting these the MOU to a vote or to sign. Of course, if it's a mayor, in many cases, it's easy for the mayor to just say, we're going to do this. And sometimes they get a vote from city councils. The county commissions, it's going through a more perhaps difficult process of getting all the county board members to agree to it. So we were very excited. So Dean, we should have cake tonight, but we just, as of yesterday, Sarasota County joined the Resilience Coalition. So now we're up to 30 local governments, which is really exciting. And so the important thing here is that Sarasota County is not actually one of our normal members. So they've decided that they like what's going on, they're interested in the approach, and so they've joined us. So one of the most important things, as you all know, is really the engagement of your community organizations and other stakeholders. So this list is actually out of date. It keeps expanding. These are organizations that are both businesses, consulting firms that might have a stake in the game in terms of advising us, to community organizations like the Sustaining Foundation or different departments and colleges within the university. So this is a really important group for us because it helps me to keep up with new changes, critical frameworks, all kinds of good things, and learning from around the country. So important that. So one of the things I thought, we would just sort of take stock, because some people say, well, climate's the future. What's really, things are, we're concerned about hurricanes. So one of the things I always start off with when I go out and speak into the community and to different stakeholders is to really start with what are the local impacts of the changing conditions or climate change. And for the past 5 years, actually looking at 2014 to 2015, we've had nearly $1 billion in damages in these county areas. And when you think about that, we haven't had a major hurricane, like knock on wood, right? And so some of these were no-name storm events. Of course, Irma, there was damage. So the real aspect of this is looking at how we're already experiencing massive cost for recovery in things that in a normal case, it's only going to increase. So one of the points on here that I want to draw your attention to, so when you get this, is the NOAA Storm Events Database, which lists the storms and the events and costs associated with them, recorded costs. So it's a good resource for your any of your projects and your research. So we talk about how is the organization funded? Fundamentally, we're supported by dues from the counties and membership dues from the cities. In addition, we work to develop grants from funding agencies to help identify new resources and support that we need, and then apply this to the different efforts we have. So in this case, we have a 3-year grant from the Environmental Protection Agency to help support the One Bay resilient communities. And we're using this to bring together the different organizations, the different experts around the region. And then most recently in August, we started discussing the impacts of extreme heat, because heat hasn't really been a topic of conversation within the resilience, the local resilience community. We've been really focused on flood and sea level rise. And also this grant is helping to support the regional action plan. So one of the things that the coalition has is a number of work groups. And this past spring, one of the work groups has really been working on evaluating shorelines. And so the importance of shorelines to our region is pretty obvious, but the variability of what is there on the ground right now compared to where we think we need to go is really important to understand. So we collaborated with the UF College of Law Conservation Clinic to help us evaluate where are the policies at among the local governments right now, because it's, as with everything, whether it's sustainability or any kind of program, you really need a baseline understanding of what's going on today and to understand how are we going to move forward in the future. So what UF did for us was a truckload of work from the law students, identified among the 30 local governments that we have, how are they addressing seawalls within policy and ordinances, and what number of them. So you can see out of the 30 that we have, we got 20 or 19 there. Additionally, though, the heights are only defined in 7 of those 30, and you can see the variety of heights. And in some cases, this is kind of an interesting thing, because you go, oh, well, Gulfport's only 3.5. Well, Gulfport defined that height back in the 70s, so they were actually kind of ahead of the curve. As currently, Pinellas County has defined 5 feet as their parameters. So a lot of this helps us to understand where are we at today? And this is the kind of work that the Regional Planning Council does over and over and over again on a variety of different issues and and to conduct these sort of assessments is an important part of any future policy or planning job. You know, you look at where you're at, wherever the local government or entity or agency is, and then look at who's really setting, you know, some best practices and model language for you. So just touch briefly, which is a very exciting program. As we mentioned about receiving the grants last fall, we submitted a proposal to look at how we could enhance resilience through solar plus storage and microgrids. The question was, what role can solar plus storage play in the context of safety? You know, we know a lot about solar energy in terms of energy efficiency, energy demand. So our question, which was through one of our counties, was like, hey, let's go after this grant. And we were like, well, we don't know much about this. Well, and as it turns out, our regional approach and our replication-driven structure is really what made NREL very excited about that. Because when they looked at the 4 collaborators we have, Pinellas County, Manatee, Hillsborough, and the City of Largo, our industry advisor, and we have a technical consulting firm called Converge Strategies, and Patel as all the partners. Our real goal is to help develop these kind of consistent frameworks, what we call the resilience-based sighting and evaluation toolkit, which is to wrap around a lot of the existing energy efficiency and energy demand sighting types of mechanisms or methods that are used right now. And so it's not just like, oh, here's CJ's idea of resilience-based sighting. We selected FEMA Community Lifelines assessment because all of the cities and counties do this already. They already go through these processes through their emergency management. So the goal of creating this toolkit, along with the workshops and all the other good stuff that'll come out of this, is to help us understand where we could invest in solar plus storage and microgrids that would improve public safety during extended power outages. So some of it may be you know, municipally owned buildings, others may be community buildings or owned by nonprofits or private sector groups. So by using the FEMA Lifeline, which clearly spells out how we should protect our community, our citizens, and our assets, we can craft this framework. And that's what we're looking at right now. So you go through these series of critical buildings, vulnerable populations, looking at the economic impact. So there's a lot to this. I can see it in my head, but that's why we've hired the consulting firms. And it's also why you know, I'm excited for the students who'll be participating in them, because they'll be developing assessments and case studies for the local governments who selected different buildings. So it's going to have a lot of interesting information coming out of that. And this is, I'm going to skip this quickly. Don't try to read it. Whoop, backing up. Basically, this framework is what we're talking about. The case studies in the spring, there will be additional workshops, and we're just hoovering up an enormous amount of existing knowledge and framework. So yesterday, I just pulled down like from 2017 FEMA disaster outage national recommendations on blah, 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 right? So one of our goals is, like you do with many projects, you know, create a giant matrix of matrix, figuring out, cross-comparing, and then working through these things. So till you come to how can we help prioritize this document? So one of the things I wanted to do now, so if you want to all go in and click on this, so this is an attempt to do, and if it's too complicated, we don't want to spend too much time on it, but the idea is, what thoughts do you have? What concerns do you have about extended power outages to critical infrastructure and community buildings? So Kelly, I'm afraid if I get out of my presentation to watch the chat, I will probably screw things up. So can somebody, let's see if we go to this, and I'll try to come back. Is anybody able to get to the jam? Are you able to get to the jam by clicking on that presentation? And if you're muted, maybe you can unmute yourself if you're having problems. Well, I'm not seeing anybody yet. Is the link functioning?
Someone responded that they're not able to get into it, CJ.
Oh, no. I wonder if that was a security thing. Let me,
I think it is security. It says access is denied.
When link is functioning, request sent. Let's try this one. All right, well, I don't want to waste a lot of time on it. If you guys want to share in the chat box for a little while, we can actually do that, and I can actually capture that. Now I'm back out of the presentation, right? You guys are seeing my face instead of the presentation. All right. Obviously, I didn't set the link up correctly, so that's what I get for doing something on the fly. Never do this. Practice your stuff. So let us have a quick chat on via chat about what are some of your thoughts about concerns about power outages and community buildings. Okay, well, let's ignore the link. Sorry, folks. Google and their links. Yeah, indoor comfort, especially for vulnerable populations, right? Can you guys think about public health impacts? How would heat affect people with different health conditions? Good comment. So what we've also come to learn through this project, which I had no idea, I mean, may not be a surprise to many of you, but is the significance. All right, yay, you guys are going. Power outages in hospitals, productivity and efficiency for IT and remote working. Oh yeah, right. The continued pandemic and natural disasters. I'm looking at these great chats. So one of the things that I found out was really significant is water treatment. The vulnerability of water treatment facilities is there are sections of the systems which, if they go down in terms of pumping, or so it can impact clean water, it can impact the ability to treat wastewater, and there's all kinds of things associated with that. So we definitely learned some key things about this NREL aspect. So we're going to keep sharing more information about what are these resilience-based impacts. So I wanted to put that framework in your head, because it's really challenging right now is to quantify resilience impacts from beyond just going, well, people get swept away on a flood. So I'm going to shift back to my presentation, and let's see, back there. Oops, wrong one. And move on. Now, are you guys seeing my presentation again? Kelly?
Not yet, CJ.
Come on, Chloe. Come. Is he sleeping?
No. Bed.
Please mute.
Please mute.
There we go. Are you guys seeing my presentation again?
Yes, you're good now, CJ.
Okay. Let me move this up. So one of the things that we started to really take stock with, let me get that right up, was how does housing fit in the context of resiliency? What are the things that need to be considered in the context of floods and hazards, and how is nature-based adaptation all integrated into these things? So we noticed that housing and community vulnerability is not yet been integrated into the regions, the different local governments, except for very different approaches, different strategies. For example, Hillsborough County did a big project, and they're still doing it. So a lot of good stuff, but a lot of questions and a lot of variability. So what we started to look at was, what's the broader context of community vulnerability? And there's a good link in here for you to catch later, but FEMA really does have a definition for this, of what they want people to consider, which is really the implications of the individual, household, and community levels, and potentially harmful outcomes from deaths and damage to infrastructure. And so we're really needing to look at both the physical exposure and the social and human dimensions, which is a lot of the social demographics piece. So one of the things that we then did was we developed a proposal which was funded by the JP Morgan Chase Foundation, and it's called Resilience and Energy Analysis of Communities and Housing in the Tampa Bay region. And we're just getting started, and the intent is to really take an integrated look at housing, public housing, affordable housing that's also sort of just in your neighborhood, not funded by any kind of state or federal budget, and low and moderate income communities to really understand how people and how housing and how neighborhoods are going to be affected by extreme weather and sea level rise, and then develop strategies and policies to increase new development and better and new housing. And the partners on this include UF, Schimberg Center for Housing Studies, Florida Housing Coalition, United Way Suncoast, and the USF School Center for Florida for Design and Community Research. So basically bringing all these folks together. The objectives are very high level. Really, it's about developing a coordinated framework and methodology, consistent metrics to be able to evaluate community vulnerability. So if you worked in one city and I was right next to you and I'd be like, well, I think community vulnerability is this, or housing defined as at risk is a different thing. And it really opens up some issues for policy conflicts or challenges in creating real resiliency particularly when your neighborhood. So creating a standardized approach for even mapping. How do we define what's at risk under what kind of conditions, right? Producing new maps for the local governments, defining the approaches for assessing housing energy consumption. This is something we have not tackled yet. So it could be a future Patel collaboration because there's a lot of good work that's already being done. But how do we do this when we're talking about many houses over many cities? Also, what's important is to integrate ALICE. ALICE is a term that's created by the United Way. It's called Asset Limited, Income Constrained, and Employed. So it's a way of defining working folks who have jobs, but who have cost burdens. So we're not just talking about federal welfare. So looking at this category of people, which comprise almost 45% of our entire region in terms of population, and how do we understand the impacts to resilient housing and engage them as well? So these things we talked about, once we get these standards, then this really translates into a regional roadmap for integrating affordable housing and resilience planning. So you don't just have us working on infrastructure and bridges over here and then completely unassessed aspects of housing and resilient land use and development. So a lot of other things to update some future government plans and policies. And the big picture, the end of it, is to really have enough data to quantify how much construction of affordable housing at a variety of different ranges is needed and in what areas would be better than other areas. And that has a whole slew of things from resilience to transportation to food and all that good stuff. So out of this is a massive project, but 3 key tools or resources will be produced. And we're really looking at these things and getting a lot of input, and we'll talk about them, and we'll welcome you to get some more input on this. So one of the things that you may be familiar with is the CDC Social Vulnerability Index, and that is a great data resource for looking at social vulnerabilities and demographics. And we began identifying additional data sets beyond the CDC tool that are really significant and help us understand what are aspects of both resiliency and opportunity. And looking at that and the ability to map that is really important. So in this case, here's an example. We'll be defining a set of what we call integrated data bundles or data sets that identify compound vulnerability. So if from your hurricane evacuation program, you're going to say, well, there's some people who could just shelter in place. You don't have to evacuate. They're out of a flood risk zone. But let's say they happen to be in some really older and maybe some less updated housing stock and also low income. And also they're surrounded by a flood zone. And so they have to be able to have 2 weeks supply of food, or for example. So what's the real understanding of like a food desert? How does that actually apply in the context of this kind of thing? So as you can see, adding data layers, asking more nuanced questions about how does this recommendation is affected by this and this and this. So in addition, we have the partnership with UF. They've already created a mapping tool to use and integrate the statewide housing data sets, along with a variety of different flooding parameters. And so you can look at current floods, so tidal surges, future sea level rise, evacuation zones. And we, through our partnership, UF will be updating this to be specific to regional data sets that we're using. But right now you could go there and do the work that you needed and look at what's at risk and who's living there. So this is an example of some of the images that we talk about if you're in a floodplain and you have additional exposures beyond the floodplain, which may look at things like storm surge and sea level rise. So this is where we're right now having lots of conversations about how do you define risk and what do you mean by high, medium, and low? It's really about when, right? So you may be at low risk for sea level rise now, but you're at medium risk for other things. So you always have to remember, you got to put a time-based scenario on your risks. It's not just a generic, yep, high risk, you know, and that's particularly challenging, but is important because all the aspects of planning really tie into time-based documents. So I thought we would just open up the chat again if you have time. I know we're pushing towards the end and perhaps you don't want to. I can either go through the regional action plan really quickly and then we can have all the conversations and questions we want. Kelly, what do you recommend? Dean, what do you recommend?
Why don't you go through the regional action plan, then we can.
Okay, all right, we'll do that fast. Then we'll come back. So as we mentioned, we're in the process of developing the regional action plan. The purpose is to help create this sort of positive aspirational vision. It should include coastal, inland, suburban, and rural communities. It's going to define goals and objectives. It's built from working with the local governments and the partners and the stakeholders in our community. So this is not a top-down, but it needs to reflect sort of federal and state planning requirements, also define best practices, some metrics, whether we can leverage certification programs like Lead for Cities, and should have a scorecard. And this is what the local government staff asked for. It's really a 5-year strategic plan. If you think about it, and what can we do to set specific prioritized goals and actions so we can define our progress. Yet it has to be fairly high level. So if it gets too detailed, maybe not everyone can buy into it. So we want widespread acceptance. It also needs, it will be focusing primarily on risk reduction of flooding and heat, but through adaptation. However, the local governments also want carbon mitigation and sustainability to be woven in and integrated. So not like, here's the chapter on sustainability. So if we talk about resilient neighborhoods, how is sustainability and mitigation included? And the same thing goes for equity. There isn't just oh, we'll be equitable. It is how can these specific resilient redevelopment policies improve equity as we develop these things. So that's the kind of conversations. Here's the chapters we have. It'll be very basic on some level. So, you know, risks and future conditions, community vulnerability, people, place, and prosperity. We're really using a streamlined process from the City Resilience Index, which was developed for the Rockefeller Resilient 100. We're sort of adapting things from there. Here's a quick overview of the timeline. So this fall, we will have workshops that'll be virtual for each of the chapters. Then we'll weave it all back together in the spring, and then we'll be going around and co-hosting workshops with the counties and the cities based on their capacity and other programs. Then we're also planning to do a community engagement thing. So you can just see it's going to be a year from now, we will have a plan fundamentally. So lots of opportunity for engagement with students as a part of the effort. One of the things I wanted to let you know we're going to be creating, because it's very difficult, but we have a commitment to engage the community more broadly. And so we're going to be working on a special set of questions that will be through this online tool called MetroQuest, which can be very visual, drop and drag. And we also have tablets. So we're trying to figure out how to do community engagement We'll be working with nonprofit organizations, taking it to the streets or the halls or wherever we can go that's COVID safe. And that's the plan, to get additional input beyond the sort of standard business leaders and that sort of thing. So that's the hope for that. So that was basically the quick recap of the plan. And now I guess we can shoot back over to have questions and chat now.
Thank you, CJ. So here's the opportunity for our students to ask questions, engage in discussion with CJ. Please raise your hand.
So there's a variety of ways where we could identify different components for collaboration, for involving students. We're not very organized in having lots of interns, but if there were specific types of questions projects, we might be able to define some collaboration. I think this is where, Dean, I would have to talk to you or Kelly to figure this out. Generally speaking, we encourage groups, stakeholder groups, and people with specialized expertise to sign up to become Resilience Coalition partners. So as a partner, then we can reach out and say, Florida stormwater engineers, come and tell us the latest best practices on green infrastructure and stormwater management, right? And so the Regional Planning Council doesn't go down to the level of the specific citizen in a specific city and county, because that would be, walking into somebody else's backyard, right? So we work with our cities in the counties to engage locals. But if there's folks who are interested in, participating in the workshops, or we can find some way that there's perhaps a collaborative approach to collect information that we could use, I welcome that. I know you guys are busy with school, plus you also work and have lives. So I think we'll just have to give it some thought.
Sure, we will. I see a hand, someone with the letter L. Please go ahead, please. Hello? I don't know who that is. What's the name? It only says L. I can't read the name.
Dean, we also have Dr. Haldar with his hand raised.
Unmute yourself, man.
Go ahead.
CJ, thanks for giving the interesting talk and for the plug-in for the class as well. I think I just have a quick comment. There were some questions there about how can the students participate in the projects that you mentioned, especially the ones that are not in the class. I think it's maybe a little late for them to try and get engaged in the class-based project. But I think maybe for the other projects that you're involved with that we're not currently involved with, maybe you can say a few things about that. How could the students get involved in some of the other projects as well?
Yeah, I think so. We'll have opportunities for review and data collection and development of plans and breakout sessions facilitation. What is challenging for my office, it's me and 5 other people. And so we have to build a consistent team that sticks with us for a whole project, right? And so what we might be looking for, and maybe there's some informal Patel group that we can figure out, how can we better engage you all, right? Or individual students can write to me, and then I can be disappointing or potentially encouraging. So,
well, potentially our students could design some kind of a project as part of the capstone research.
Oh.
So it can come out of it in the not immediately, but sometimes next spring or the summer when they plan to graduate. And that is something that they can keep in the back of the mind.
Oh, that would be great. I see somebody named Ang Ryan with a hand raised. Ang, you're muted.
Hi, thanks so much, Ms. Reynolds. This was a really fantastic presentation. So I've got a question. I think this is just really fantastic. But with you know, the amount of land that's owned privately and the limitations that federal and state and local policies have to you know, require landowners to build their houses, you know, out of flood zones or utilize, you know, something in lieu of seawalls, like a natural stabilization process, like living shorelines. You know, what do you suggest that, you know, we do to create these changes that need to occur? Because as you know, we have like regulatory takings issues. So there's really only so much that the government can tell the private property owners to do with their land.
This is a great question, and it's like an entire day at the floodplain manager's legal session. And I've actually asked those questions. What tools do we have? And it ranges, and our region isn't ready yet, but other cities and counties are now starting to face those components. So you need both permitting and design incentives to do things. So anything that, for example, we're looking at the shoreline policy. If it is currently natural today, the goal would be to help it remain natural in a hierarchy of policy. If it is, so you know, we're going to change how easy it is to get permits to do things. This would be an example. I'm not saying it's a thing that's done. If you have a seawall that maybe doesn't need to be a seawall, but it's crumbling and coming down, there's incentives to help you encourage you to naturalize it, right? And because that's actually more resilient to storm surge than putting up a new seawall, although many people perceive that. So the other part of it is that in the future, you know, local governments may say, you know what, we cannot afford to keep replacing certain kinds of utilities like storm, sewer system water for areas that are extensively at risk. So, for example, certain counties supply water lines to certain barrier island cities. Those barrier island cities who don't have their own wastewater treatment or their own things may be at, you know, experiencing some questions where this county should let them know now, how long do you intend to do this? Because we can't. So the question of budget is going to be the big one. Some things may be funded, other things may not get funded, because money has to be reprioritized. So you may say that's takings by neglect. Takings is a legal term, if y'all know. It basically means that the government has done something to steal the value of your land, fundamentally, sort of. So I think that these are enormously complicated. But in certain aspects, like with the housing one, you in the future, there's more and more requirements where you are not going to be able to use federal funded programming in certain risk zones. And so by us better categorizing what zones are the risk, right, and defining that, then, you know, it will have to result in different changes to what gets built and where. So it's going to take a long time, and it's going to require some political will, and people will try to engineer their way out of this before they really, you know, address some of the other issues. I would wish we would spend a lot of money on carbon reduction that we are going to end up spending on, you know, mitigation from flood, right? So, good questions.
Right, CJ, I have just for clarification, the NREL funded project on solar energy, is that as a part of a mitigation in terms of, not mitigation, but as a way to reduce the risk involved if there's a power outage as a result of storm surges or other kinds of weather conditions? Is that the idea of that project?
Yes, so the idea...
How can it be viable in different communities as stored energy, perhaps, in terms of
stored energy and microgrids and being away from that. So the real question came, I was a part of a USF, so the College of Marine Science study. They were evaluating post-Maria effects of air quality, because when you have massive disasters and people are running generators and using wood for fire, you have a lot of air quality issues, right? Not to mention the fact that fuel systems are disrupted during hurricanes. And so the ability to become sustainable is really the goal. So if it takes, and so I don't know if you've ever experienced a power outage, if you're not a part of a major area, TECO or your utility, you're in a hierarchy, right? So the utilities have a hierarchy of when they're going to, you know, they want everything fixed right away, of course, but the amount of people, the amount of you probably were around, and there was many like folks fixing our area were from like Ohio, the utility systems from Ohio. So as more of these disasters become greater in magnitude or perhaps frequency, we can't rely and put the burden on the utilities. We must become self-sustainable, but that needs to not look like everybody has their own generator and 18 cans of gasoline in their shed, because that's not sustainable either. And so how can we take advantage of the solar plus storage context, and whatever policy changes we're going to need to make at the Public Service Commission level to ensure, and what the knowledge of the technical gurus to ensure that we can shut it off and we can use it to keep ourselves powered at night. So when you start to think about the importance of, can you do that for a community organization like the CDC community district, right? Can you do that for Metropolitan Ministry? What if Publix did that? What if CVS did that? You know, the importance of community safety, public safety has not been, and there's tons of federal documents that basically say that we're really enormously at risk. So there's other things that utilities can do to harden the systems, put things below ground, whack the trees, or do what. But fundamentally, there's things that we can do that are going to give us energy benefits now, carbon reduction benefits now. And if we are unfortunate and there is a disaster, more people should be able to be sustainable. So actually Duke Energy has already gone to the Public Service Commission and asked for a special, I guess they're calling it a pilot project. Is that right, Pradeep? To do this and install this solar plus storage on a community shelter in Pinellas County. They're going to pay for it. They get the benefit of the energy, and it's near a substation. So there's some utilities that are very smart, and they would like to see all of our emergency operations centers have this kind of thing on it. Anyway, I'll stop talking so more questions can be asked. So it is first a sustainability and safety question.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
Uh-huh.
Any more questions from our faculty or students?
What would you say are practical solutions for those who live outside city limits and more rural areas? I have plenty of neighbors, but the houses are spread out. Wow, this is a good question. I think certainly understanding who is at risk for what of your neighbors. Are they older folks? Do they have risks? And working on neighborhood barbecue once we can all get back together and creating a kind of understanding of how much you can take care of each other. There is a group working on rural solar as a part of the NREL project, but that's not our thing.
Okay, all right. Kelly, are there any questions students sent you?
No, Dean, I think they're all in the chat box right now.
Okay.
We did have a number of students when CJ mentioned who's interested in consulting.
Yeah, we'd like to get back to that question, why you raised those issues, just to find out about students' motivation or what they would like to do after graduation. We don't know why you.
Yes, because I think it's important, because you can start to think about pathways and approaches, right? So even when we talk about the case studies in the energy finance class, how you would use that, how you think about it, you know, if you're going to become a consultant, those kind of tools then become something you can adopt for your own practice and help your clients do, and it's a business builder. Or if you're working, your goal is to work within a local government, you do it and it's just for you, right? So the idea becomes the tools that we create aren't just things for government, but also for potential future consulting roles in using that. And I like to go and talk to different consultants and find out what kind of nifty tools they've created. Like there's a great one at Atkins called Simulation City, which looks at floodplain. I'm going to put my email into the chat box so you can feel free to copy. Hopefully I didn't put any spell types in that. Do I recommend grad school for careers in sustainability, consulting, or government? I think graduate school is very useful for specialized technical knowledge. I myself do not have a graduate degree. I am old, however, so it's a different paradigm. So I did take 3 classes through the Environmental Science Master's Certificate Program, and then I got hired to do things. So, but I have a 20-year career of looking at hazards in the food safety world. So I applied my hazard analysis skill set. So that's for the other thing, for those of you who are changing careers, leveraging your previous experience into your new knowledge and to find new gaps and opportunities. It's there's like a lot of tremendous different ways you can slice this. I think food security and sustainability is growing in recognition. And a lot of our programs tend to be sort of like yay local, which is great, but there's a lot of limitations to that. And you know, the total life cycle question of how much energy do you need to grow things in a boxcar, right? I mean, there's just it's more and more complicated, but yet innovation is what we need. And I look at that from questions of aquaculture to you know, lettuce locally and all that. Anyway, I got off on a tangent. I'm sorry, Dean.
No, not at all. In fact, you touched on a very important subject. We do have a concentration, food security and sustainability.
That's very important. I'm so glad you do. And that actually is something, maybe we should talk offline about that, because we do not have expertise in-house on food security and agriculture. And I'm having a bit of a challenge because we want the regional action plan to be able to appropriately understand what are the risks to agriculture by climate change, but we don't want to, you know, create fake information. So I'm right now doing an assessment of who, you know, there's a USDA Southeast Climate Hub that has produced a vulnerability assessment of food that is produced in Florida. So
we should have a conversation. I can point to Dr. Dorsey, who is the director of that concentration, who can provide you with some students who just recently graduated or about to graduate, whom you might want to hire, or perhaps as a part-time or whatever. Wonderful. So I think we're about past the time that what is allocated for this talk. So without, I would like to thank you, CJ Reynolds, for coming today and then speaking to us about your work. It's very important. So thank you again.
Thank you for fitting me in. It was nice to meet you. And students, I'm so grateful for all the work you guys are doing. Keep at it. Keep at it. You're so important. And we're really, counting on you to help, bridge the gap and bring in some new ideas. So, all right, good luck to y'all. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Kelly, for closing words.
I just wanted to thank CJ and our students, and to also share that CJ's video will be available tomorrow on our speaker website, so everyone can view that as well. And CJ, I'm inspired by the opportunity for future collaboration that you mentioned, so we will definitely stay in touch.
Great.
Thank you for your expertise today.
Thank you both. All right, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
CJ.
Bye.